For the longest time, I wanted to build a viaduct to support a large section of elevated track. I needed it to be sturdy, and in some sections I needed it to be curved. You've got to love helpful, generous model railroad buddies. A friend of mine named Charlie Easton gave me this idea that solved all my problems. I thought I would make this video to share Charlie's brilliant idea with others. So I made these by getting these acoustic tile panels that you can get from Lowe's or Home Depot. They're usually 2x4. You might think you don't want to spend a lot on a whole box of new ceiling tiles, but what you can do is search your local stores and look for damaged boxes. I found something like this at Lowe's. In fact, the one I found was just wrapped in plastic, a whole bunch of damaged tiles, and I got the whole lot for about $10, I think. Then in this case, I wanted something 4 inches wide. So I cut 4-inch wide strips on my bandsaw. So I had a whole lot of pieces to put together, and then glued with just wood glue, clamped them, and you can see that in this slide, how that was done. And then after the glue is dried, because you don't want wet glue in your bandsaw, I used a template to mark a line for the cut I wanted, and then I put it through the bandsaw. Let me talk a little more now, though, about how I made several sections for a long viaduct. I wanted to have a long viaduct, but I didn't think I was going to be able to put it through the bandsaw if it was 4 feet long. So I made several sections, each about 15 inches long, that would interlock together like you see in this picture. I created a jig for gluing up these parts, and there are vertical braces here, 90 degrees to a back wall, so I could butt the pieces up against the back wall to make sure they were all flat and straight. And then I made these wooden blanks for the open spots I needed. So every other layer is alternating. You can see these 6 arrows show 6 of the blanks. You can see the wood glue on the right, just used to glue each section together. So I cut several sections that got wider as they got taller, just to save some material, but you wouldn't need to. You could have made this with full-length pieces that went all the way across. But the key is to use these blanks to alternate the pieces. So you can see the blank is on the left side on the second row, but on the right side on the bottom row. That way, when they mate, that will work like a hinge. So then I glued them all the way up, alternating those blocks, and then clamped them till the glue was dry. Now that you've got the opening or the arc underneath, you can start to put on this decorative stone, I'll call it. And cutting all of these tiles creates a dust like this. That is the acoustic tile byproduct. Works perfectly for mixing with white glue. I used Mod Podge and diluted a little bit and made a paste out of that. And then using another template, you can see here, applied that paste on top. So it looks three-dimensional, it is three-dimensional, and appears like decorative stone used along the edges of the openings. So once this layer of dust and Mod Podge is applied for the stones, I let it dry for about an hour. And then I used this 1/2-inch flat X-Acto knife blade to make the mortar lines and just press them in. If you do it any sooner, the cut you make will just collapse and disappear. But if you wait about an hour, then you can make a mortar line. If you wait too much longer, it will tear. Then I wanted to make the vertical mortar lines in the walls. Now, believe it or not, I didn't do anything with the horizontal lines. That's just what happens when the layers are put together. So again, I took my 1/2-inch knife, just pushed it in, wiggled it back and forth to sort of separate the tile and make a little wedge, and that gives me this line. Now, it might not look this good when you do it, or obvious, but when you use a wash after the fact, it will help bring it out. Once the cracks have been made, I wanted it a different color than the way the tile looks straight from the box, so I wanted to stain it. I did several tests of staining it without doing anything to the tile, but it absorbs so much. It takes a lot of stain to get the color you want, or it's very irregular in color and you can't quite tell what you're going to get. So I thinned some Mod Podge with water and then painted everything so that it had a sealer, basically. Then I chose some stains, did some tests on some scrap pieces to find the color I wanted. I wanted this kind of brownish color. So I just used a Minwax stain meant for woodworking and painted everything, and it became this color. So to make this tunnel, it is on a curve, and that is the key to the problem that I had, was how was I going to make a curved tunnel in here and wedge it like this. Now, wedging it wouldn't have to be done in the prototype world, but that helped me create the curve, and I'll show you how. So I started out with a square and a stack of acoustic tile that was this wide square. So let's assume this is the same size, okay? And then I cut out the tunnel, the arc in the middle. So I've got one piece all glued up with a tunnel cut out of it, but it's straight. The tunnel is straight. So then I drew these I wanted 5 sections here that I was going to keep. So I drew these wedges, drew 4 points here, equal distance apart, and then made 5 equal size wedges. Cut them out with the bandsaw, and this part is going to be the waste. So then I would end up with these wedge-shaped pieces, and once I put them back together, glued them, we would have a wedge. And that's what gives me the curve as well. Obviously I can't cut a curve this way and the arc this way in the tunnel at the same time originally. So cutting the tunnel arc first and then wedging several of these sections gave me the curve that I wanted. After that, all the weathering and extra things like these moss climbing or vines climbing, of course you can do on your own and to whatever effect you like. I used some Bragdon powder in some spots to make streaks. You could use chalks. You can see here I just applied a string of glue and then placed on some ground cover. And on the top, of course, if you can see the top, you can add dirt. I painted it dark brown underneath just so the light color wouldn't show through if I had any bare spots, but then covered it with the usual ground cover that you would in any other part of your layout. That makes some great bridge and viaduct work that's very sturdy. It will definitely support any track that you've got if you need it to. Hopefully this will give you some ideas of tunnels and viaducts you can make for your layout.